What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. I'm Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here with my co-host,
It's your boy Mod.
Mod. He's here. What's up, brother?
Hey, how you doing, Jay?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I had a good weekend.
Yeah.
Took some time out with the wife and another couple, so we had some drinkies last night and some
Nice.
dinner, and we also went out and did an escape room.
Okay.
Have you done this thing?
Never done the escape room. No.
So it's like a puzzle,
Mhm.
and so it's a team effort to put all the clues together, and it was intense. Like we're just bouncing around every corner of the room, like following clues, and it was a lot of fun. And had a couple of drinks along the way. So yeah, I mean, good weekend for me.
Was it just the four of you guys in there, though?
Yeah. There was no other strangers.
Yeah.
We
well, that's
booked it.
cool.
Yeah.
That's so weirdos.
Yeah, because that I would have quit right there.
You're like, escape. Get me the fuck out of here.
GP, no thanks. Get the fuck.
The general public. No,
Nope.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. Yeah, I've always kind of wanted to do one of those, and
Highly
they always look pretty
recommend.
Cool. Yeah.
Highly recommend. Good fun.
Hell yeah. Had a cool weekend too. Like I was kind of telling you before the pod, we played that show, so I got to go
Yeah.
hang out and then go
Yeah, I'm jelly.
you know yeah, I mean it was a slammer of a show too. Motherfuckers just moshing everywhere, dude. It was like packed house in there. It was sweet. It was one of the better shows I've ever played.
Sweet.
And so that was cool, and then like just meeting a bunch of new people, so had some
Always.
people on the podcast and shit, and so it was a good time. Then yesterday we went to this wedding, so it was kind of like the total opposite. We were at a death metal show on Friday, then Saturday we're all dressed to the nines at a
Yeah.
wedding,
That's fun though. That's good. Fun for
so,
everyone.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, enough with that. Like I said, welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. Today we have a bio episode for you guys.
Yes.
I am covering At the Gates today. So,
I love At the Gates.
yeah, so do I, man. And obviously that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. With At the Gates, most of my research kind of comes from the I should have wrote it down here, but I kind of forget what it was called, but they actually have like a whole documentary
Okay.
on them. It's about their comeback. It's on YouTube. You can
All right.
watch it or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
on like it's all about them coming back. So it kind of stops before they started making new records, but it's about their like return to the stage after so many years of hiatus. So we'll get into that here. I think it's called Flames of the End or something like that. I don't know.
see.
Anyway, look it up. You'll find it on YouTube. But like a lot of my research comes from there. I've watched it before, but obviously, yeah, the Flames of the End.
Okay.
So I've watched it before, but then of course I'd watch it again to kind of go through this.
So, quick question though.
Yeah, sure.
Have you had the chance to see At the Gates live since they've been back?
Nope, they're the bucket list guys,
Fuck,
man.
Same. Yep.
There's still one that's
Yep.
in the bucket.
God damn it. Yeah, same here. I don't know, how many chances I've missed since they've been back. I don't think there's been that many.
Not that many. I know there's a couple that I've missed. So
Yeah, I
same
mean,
with you.
Yeah, so it usually tends to be something like Detroit on a Tuesday. Sorry, I can't make it, man. That's too far away on a weekday. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to them live too. So that's going to be a priority. I always look over at Amy and I say, this band, if the next time they come around, I'm going.
Yeah.
And I try to like kind of earmark a few bands that are getting special treatment.
Yeah. There's a few on my list still, so I need to get to those.
All right, tell me.
All right, so we'll jump in here to the At the Gates. So they hail from Gothenburg, Sweden. They have been a prominent figure in the realm of death metal since their inception in 1990. Along fellow stewards In Flames and Dark Tranquility, the band played a pivotal role in shaping the Gothenburg style and melodic death metal genre. So if you listen to some of their early work, and we'll get into a little bit more of this, but you can tell that their progression over the years. This Gothenburg sound is something that didn't start as the Gothenburg sound, right?
Yeah, that we know and love now.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and part of this bio will really be focused in on the Slaughter of the Soul, just because of the impact that it had. So we'll go into that. But
Sure.
before their temporary disbandment in 1996, At the Gates had delivered 4 albums, culminating with the iconic Slaughter of the Soul in 1995. A milestone in the Swedish death metal scene of the mid-1990s. Following a brief reunion for a one-off tour in 2008, the band regrouped again in 2011. Since then, they've graced us with 3 additional albums and an EP. At War with Reality in 2014, To Drink from the Night Itself in 2018, the EP with Pantheon's Blind, and The Nightmare of Being in 2021.
I believe I own 2 of those, To Drink from the Night Itself and The Nightmare of Being. I'm surprised I don't have the other 2. I'm surprised I don't have the entirety of their collection, to be honest with you. How did this go? Overlooked.
So I will say this. I'm going to make a correction on. I may have put a note in here, but I will make a correction right now. In one of our other podcasts, where we talk about the quintessential metal albums,
correct.
We talk about Slaughter of the Soul in there, and then we both talked on that podcast about the albums that came out after that.
Right.
We said that there was only 2.
Correct.
There was 3. We skipped At War with Reality.
Wild.
I don't know how we missed that, but so that's a correction on our part, but I did take note of that.
Yeah, that's one that I don't have too, so that's kind of weird for me to.
We'll get around to it, but that fucking album is badass, dude.
God damn it.
Like, it is really good. Like, it needs to, like, a focused listen, because with this newer stuff, for me, it was kind of all glazed over, because it's kind of like, oh, it's not Slaughter of the Soul just because of the impact of that.
Right.
But if you take these albums for what they are, each one of these afterwards, they are great albums, man. I just mean badass album. I would say At War with Reality, since, it was kind of them coming back. That album is kind of a Slaughter of the Soul Part 2 almost, because there's a lot of of the riffs and stuff to that. And then they started getting a little more progressive and a little different on the, following albums after that. We'll dive into that a little bit more, but man, take the time to listen to all those albums if you get a chance. I know you said you got The Nightmare of Being. I even think when that came out, you and I were speaking on that, and you said that was a great album because there's a lot of progressiveness and some weird stuff on there that's a lot different for
really cool.
And,
really cool album. I absolutely love it. It's still At the Gates, and it's a bit of a shorter runtime on it, but that's what you get from At the Gates anyway. You get about 40 minutes of music, and it really did harken back to Slaughter of the Soul in ways, because Slaughter of the Soul had those little instrumental breaks. That just gave you a breath. And this did the same thing, only I think those elements were not separate from the songs. They were kind of into the songs.
Yep.
And I like what they did with it, even if it had a little bit more structure than ever before. I love the progressive elements of The Nightmare of Being. I love what At the Gates is doing, and I'm interested in what they're going to do next. So take me back.
All right. So At the Gates' musical style has been a captivating blend of melodic death metal and death metal. In their early work, they showcase a progressive and complex approach to crafting songs, marked by melodic fluidity and variation. This approach would influence not only progressive death metal, but also the likes of black metal acts such as Dark Throne's Transylvania and Hunger. Much of this creative fusion can be attributed to Alf Svensson, who expertly melded the melancholic essence of Nordic folk music and death metal and classical elements.
I'm all over that.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Like, if you go back to like the Gardens of Grief and the Red in the Sky Is Ours, like some of their albums, the early days, they've always kind of like had that cool like classical influence, some violins in there, some really acoustic guitars. They've always kept that, and I think that's made the big impact of that Gothenburg metal, because that's what separated them just from the straight distorted death metal scene of Florida.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, we're fucking 10 tracks of distortion and fucking heavy drums from beginning to end,
I think one of the cool things that I find about the Gothenburg sound and At the Gates especially perhaps is that they have like a real cultural identification in their music. Like, you can tell that those melodies come from their heritage. Those are like some folk melodies going way back in time, 1,000 years or more, you know what I mean?
Right.
You can just feel the essence of their heritage in their music, and it's not like on the nose. They don't just break into like some old Swedish folk, but nonetheless, you can feel the elements of their heritage in their music. And I think it's awesome. They play to it just right, so well. It's not in your face. It's not like I said,
right.
They're not taking you back in time, but you can feel it. Like, just the same if it was an Egyptian scale, you're like, well, they must be from that region of the world, right? Or if it was maybe South American, and you could feel, like Brazilian, like Sepultura, you could feel the heritage in music. And I love that about At the Gates too.
That's a great point, because that is a very strong element of their music.
100.
So, as their journey progressed, At the Gates style left an indelible mark on the entire Gothenburg region. However, With Svensson's departure, their commercial breakthrough album, Slaughter of the Soul, took on a more traditional song structure, a stripped-down, no-frills melodic death metal masterpiece that encapsulated the essence of the genre and inspired the who's who of melodic metal music. That's a lot of M's right there. Yeah, I mean, once that album came out, that really set the stage for you wouldn't have a Black Dahlia Murder, you wouldn't have a Darkest Hour, you wouldn't have all these bands going to record in Gothenburg just to try to figure out how to get that sound. But I think, like you said, the big difference is like you could take some of that, but if that's not your culture, you're not ever going to have what At the Gates had. You know what I mean? Like you said, that's instilled in their, pantheon,
Yeah, we grew up listening to Boston and Journey, and so like we and Led Zeppelin, and so we know kind of like rich guitar melodies, but we don't reach back to like the folk in the same way that they do, right?
Yep.
So it definitely has a lot to do with culture and heritage, So more to your point, like Black Dahlia Murder, love that band.
Oh yeah,
love that band.
Love that band.
But you don't hear Swedish heritage culture in their music, but they do have really cool elements to their melodic breakdowns, and that speaks more to like their style, and that's where they distinguish themselves from a band like At the Gates, because they'll be very melodic, but it doesn't sound Swedish. It doesn't have that, cultural impact on you when you listen to it. But they definitely would be a band that I would sit right down beside At the Gates and say, yep, right on the shelf, right next to At the Gates, because they're in that vein for sure.
When I first heard Black Dahlia, I was like, wait, this is like At the Gates 2.0. They like kind of picked up. They're like, oh, they're gone now. Let's but let's just crank it up a notch with like more double bass, more grind, more faster.
And that just goes to the point of the bio, because they spawned almost an entire genre after their Slaughter of the Soul album. People were like, that is perfect.
Yep. So. All right, we're going to get into the early career of At the Gates. So they emerged in late 1990. Thomas Lindberg, vocalist from Bidel, drummer Adrian Ellerson, Andres Borler on lead guitar, joined by his twin brother Jonas Borler on bass, and guitarist Elf Svensson.
Love it.
So Lindberg got his early influences through the tape trading scene when he landed Metallica's Kill Them All. So
that's a gold.
We see this time and time again. I mean, the tape trading scene. I mean, we know all about it. Metal Maniacs magazine contributed to the tape trading culture. Let's trade some tapes. I got these cool things. Let's see what you got. Show me. So then where did he land? Metallica's Kill 'Em All.
Yeah, and that's a gold nugget to get in the tape trading scene halfway across the world. That's huge. Like, I mean, could have got something not as good as Kill 'Em All.
Well, I'm sure he got some.
You could, probably got a few turds, but you could do way worse than Kill 'Em All.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then he graduated to Slayer, nod to Slayer, because that's where they all start as well, So, and then dove into fanzines and the underground scene world, as almost all of us do, as we just prefaced. He started jamming with some friends, and his first band was called Grotesque. The scene was very spread out through the country of Gothenburg, and the main scene resided in Stockholm. So that was the thing that he was talking about, like trying to get enough guys together, because there's a lot of guys that did it. But over there, I don't believe, and I may be speaking out of turn, but I kind of got the impression that like there was a lot of guys that did it, but they were spread out. And it's not like over here where there's all these roads and stuff. You got to take trains to get to places. There's a long ways away to reach the next town, where you and I could drive 20 minutes to go jam with a guy out in Grand Haven.
Yeah, and who's lugging their guitar and amp on the train.
Right. So, and the funny thing you say that, we'll get into some of this, because that was definitely some of the challenges that they faced. So Thomas networked with tons of people by going to shows, tape trading, and eventually crossed paths with Svensson. Elf Svensson came across Grotesque tape and really liked their brutal and violent style. Elf came from punk bands, and the punk scene moved to Gothenburg for school and ended up jamming with Grotesque. Anders ended up crossing paths with Thomas through the scene as well, and was inspired by Carcass and Morbid Angel.
Go figure.
He found himself hanging out at the practice space of Grotesque. Anders started a band called Infestation. Grotesque ended up splitting due to the differences in vision, and Thomas, Elf, and Anders formed a new band called At the Gates. John Jonas Borlaug started on drums, but eventually moved over to bass. Anders rounded out the 5-piece, but occupied the drum throne. They started working on their first song, All Life Ends. At the Gates had total creative freedom with what they were doing, sometimes reversing tapes to come up with ideas or even putting 10 riffs together back to back. So the early days of At the Gates, I mean, you can listen to the Gardens of Grief. They just wanted to be creative, and they did what they did. Like influences from Slayer, Metallica, yeah, but if you listen to it, you wouldn't really know, like obviously the heaviness transferred over, but the stuff that they were doing. But, that Svensson, he was a big part of the early days of the writing and really, like making sure that the band was heading in a direction. Like he was the main creative behind it, but he did a lot of different things like reverse tapes backwards.
Yeah.
He was influenced by a lot of like the classical guitar and folk music. So that's what kind of put that element into At the Gates, right? So, that was just kind of a brief history of kind of how they all got together. It was just kind of how everybody does. You cross paths with this guy, you meet this guy at a show, we hang out here, he hangs out with me, but we're not in the same band, but then eventually you're in his band type of thing,
Usually for every good band that exists, however many members are in that band, there's at least that many prior bands that came into that band being. So if it's a 4-piece, each one of those guys is probably in a band before they got to the band that made them anything at all. So no surprise there. Everybody's handshaking and tape trading back in the day.
What was cool about this documentary too, they do have like a lot of video of this stuff. So they were like documenting different stuff. Like, it's not the cleanest or best video, but like you can get a real visual on kind of what they were going through and how things were happening at those old shows and, just grinding it out, trying to get by,
Love it.
So they entered Sunlight Studio in January 91 to record their debut EP, Gardens of Grief, under the Dolores record label's banner. The EP is a mix of raw death metal with some discords and blackish death. So I say that because there's just some raw, nasty chords in there, some discords. There's a little, like, you could really tell that European black metal influence was there.
Yeah.
That's not what they were going for necessarily, but they had just some of that nastiness element. They weren't the clean, polished At the Gates that we know today. So
right.
I do love Gardens of Grief, actually.
Okay.
It's a cool record. I've always liked it. But it's not as bad as Carcass first record,
right?
And it's not as bad as a lot of black metal, early black metal. But it's raw, it's rough,
Yeah.
So, but the recording is an early '90s recording, but I personally enjoy the rawness of it. The art from the CD was pulled from an old book with pictures of Spanish gardens.
Cool.
The EP was released in May of 1991 and caught the attention of Peaceville Records, leading to their signing with the label. At the Gates got in the van and started playing countless shows, gigging with bands like Bolt Thrower, Immolation, and Massacre. They played every show they could, from rec centers to squats, or what they called them, and clubs. I'm assuming squats, the way they said it, were just like places where people hung out in like these different rec centers and stuff. So like anywhere they could play and bring their equipment, they would play. Yeah. So you know how it was the other days. You're hungry and you want to get out there and play. You want
hall
to jam.
Shows.
Yeah. So
for sure.
So a subsidiary of Peaceville Records approached At the Gates called Def Records. They had an oral agreement, but nothing was signed as they approached recording their debut album. At the Gates wanted to return to Sunlight Studio, but they were booked, so they looked for the first studio in the Yellow Pages called Art Studios.
What are the Yellow Pages?
Yeah, exactly.
That would be a Google back in time.
So, let's see. The album was shrouded with mishaps. With no budget, not being signed, recording with amps that they could, because they couldn't fit their amps in the car after they loaded the drums in the car.
God damn it.
So they had to find whatever amps that they could. Yeah,
Fuck
exactly.
That just would not. Oh, that would be fucking hell.
So they recorded with an engineer who knew nothing about metal and being pressed for time. The record was chock full of mistakes, but also led to the charm of the record. The debut album, The Red in the Skies, was released in 1992. Looking at this thing, I was trying to look at this before we went. Something kind of got messed up there, so my bad. But so basically, after that first record, they kind of just played as many places as they could. That EP, right?
Right.
So then they got some recognition by this Def Records, which was a subsidiary of Peaceville.
Right.
And so they wanted to go and record a new batch of songs. So that's kind of where that got skipped. But so they wanted to go and record the new record.
The Red in the Sky is ours.
Yeah, exactly. So that was like their first full length.
Yep.
But it was a nightmare for them. Like as we progress into this, you're going to find out that these guys had to deal with all kinds of bullshit to try to actually get their music out there.
Right.
So when they went into the studio, this guy knew nothing about metal. He didn't know, he never recorded metal before. He was just a guy that worked at a studio, right?
Right.
Just a guy that had a job. You know what I mean?
Turning up, showing up, punching the clock.
Yeah, hoping that like it's audible at the end of the day.
Right.
So when At the Gates embarked on the recording journey for The Red in the Sky is Ours, the band had only been together for a mere year.
Ooh.
In contrast to their 1991 EP Gardens of Grief. Guitarist Anders Boiler observed that The Red in the Sky is Ours possessed a more structured approach, yet he acknowledged certain moments of experimentation with the record. Their friend Jesper Jarlin played violin, which, side note, he also tried out on guitar early on and just couldn't cut it because he wasn't that good. He was always a violinist, but some of the violin on The Red in the Sky is Ours is actually played live by their friend on there, so that was cool.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of some of that culture that we were talking about, and it gave it like a cool medieval sheen in there because you got some violins on death metal, so now we're like adding things that are like you'd never really heard much before, you know?
Yeah, when you're in a death metal band and all you're doing is listening to bass guitar and drums all day, you love to hear a new instrument in there anytime. So it's really cool that they took that avenue. Like, even had the opportunity to do it. Like, oh, this guy plays violin, get in here.
Yeah, yeah, we got this part for it.
Yeah, take what we can get.
Yeah. So this period marked a time when the band members were still getting to know each other musically. Obviously, only being together for like a year, right? Like we're just kind of jamming for a year. They did as much as they could. You're playing shows. You're trying to write a new record. You're getting a little bit of recognition, but you're just grinding it out, you know? So notably, Boiler found himself greatly inspired by guitarist Elf Svensson's ideas, which he described as over-the-top and extremely challenging.
Nice.
However, he also noted that the group occasionally pushed too hard, attempting to impress listeners with an abundance of riffs and unconventional songwriting. Been there, done that.
Yeah, we call that riff soup these days.
Yep, we're souping it up over here, you know. And if you listen to some of them early days, like The Red in the Sky is Ours does have a little more structure, like was stated. Gardens of Grief was just a little bit of playing fast and fucking grinding it out. Like whatever came out.
Right.
Backwards tape riffs, whatever comes out, you know, that's what we're putting on the record. So
yeah. But, you know, sometimes you do push your skill ceiling and you push right up against it with your songwriting, whereas maybe you don't need to, but if in the moment, in the heat of it as a musician, you're like, you know, faster, harder, more, you know, well, I want to do a longer tail on the second time. And then you circle back and listen to it and you're like, kind of hard to listen to. It's too much. Like,
too much.
Yeah, it is over the top.
It was cool for me, but if somebody's listening, probably not cool for them. You know, sometimes you got to think about that.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard when you listen to your own music 100 times over, 1,000 times over. You want to keep adding more to it and grow it forever. Like it just never ends.
Yeah.
But so I can see where things get away too progressive and too noodly, and you got to start stripping them down. And they did a good job of that.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Yes, for sure. So Boiler didn't shy away from criticizing the productions as well, labeling it as quote-unquote weird and remarking on its very weak sounding quality. So the cover art, this is kind of funny story because they talk about the cover art on all their albums leading up to Slaughter of the Soul, and it literally was just a plain red light shining through some onyx stone and a decision that they regret from this day. Like they just like cover art, whatever, put this light on it. It's called The Red in the Sky is Ours. Like it was just like very unthoughtful. Obviously the first cover art we talked about, they just found a picture in this magazine, was like, all right, we're gonna use this and put our like logo on it or whatever.
Funny.
You know, so
it's funny to me because you can kind of tell when a band doesn't have an artist or a visual artist within. Because they outsource it or it's just not as well thought out. And I'm that guy. I'm that band member. I don't possess a visual. I just can tell you what I'm thinking, but I can't draw. I can't paint. I'm terrible when it comes to visual art. I don't even do it on the computer well with graphic design. It takes a lot of time. So you can kind of tell when a band doesn't have that member within.
Oh, they didn't. You know, they're just like, picture of the magazine.
Exactly. Sometimes it's really basic. It's just a logo or a stamp or, print. But yeah, you can tell sometimes, especially in their case early on.
So after the release, the band shot its first video, Kingdom Gone. Kind of a cool video. You can go check that out on YouTube or whatever. I would suggest if you were diving into At the Gates after, listening to this bio or whatever, make sure you consume it all because it's just a cool progressive, bio all the way through to see where they're at and where they come. But Kingdom Gone is a cool video.
Yeah, and real quick, we talk about a lot of different bands and their entire catalog where some of it's not as great as others. I think At the Gates is one band where you can sit here and say you could actually pick up and start listening to At the Gates from the beginning to the current stuff and at no point say, none of it's any good. Any of it's no good.
Oh,
like, yeah. Like you can listen to the first album and it still holds up. Whereas other bands we talk about, we're like, yeah, I'd listen to it once or twice, and I don't need that. I don't need to go back to listening to their older work. At the Gates is one I can listen to all of their work, and I'm disappointed that I didn't know that 2 albums existed. There's to my own credit, to my own fairness, there's a lot of music to listen to.
Yeah.
And so if I glossed over a new At the Gates album, my mistake. There's a lot of other music to listen to.
Especially nowadays, it's hard, man, with new releases coming out every week, all the time.
I'm actually excited that I get to go back and listen to some At the Gates that's going to be new to me.
Well, like I said, if you haven't really dove into Gardens of Grief or even, like for me, I'll put that on their EP. I'll put on The Red in the Sky Is Ours. I'll put it on. And I like after going through this and hearing, like saying that the production is weird or thin and weak sounding is like, yeah, it is. But it's like all that early production kind of is, you compare it to what you've done already. And then you go back on it and speak on it. Like all of our production's weak and weird sounding at the beginning, because that's a natural progression too,
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're recording this stuff like they're recording it, on tape with DAT recorders and stuff. They're not on computers yet because we're still early 90s. We haven't introduced, the editing, so.
Was it the Studio 93 or
nope. So they released that first video, Kingdom Gone, and then Jonas soon quit the band after the recording, unsure which direction he wanted his life to take. So, being an early kid, probably in his 20s or whatever, and he was still trying to figure out exactly, what he wanted to do with his life and realizing that the band grind is a band grind. These guys will soon find out too, not a lot of money was made until later on in their career. So he was replaced by a friend of the band named Tony Anderson, who appears on the cover in the video but doesn't appear on the album. So he had quit right when the album was done, and then they went and shot the video, but his friend was in the video, and the friend was on the picture on the album.
Right.
And then there's actually, if you read the linear notes, it says band for CD and then like live band. So it's like the same names, but just
one different.
Dudes. So like the CD wasn't even out when he joined the band, so they just put his name on it, So it was like, and then so Tony was in the band for 6 months, but Jonas, after exploration, wanted to rejoin the band again. At the Gates hit the road with My Dying Bride in 1992, and their vans cruised onto the Autobahn, and At the Gates driver smashed into the back of My Dying Bride van and smashed all their gear.
God damn it.
So, like, their tour right as soon as the album was done and they were getting on the road, they smashed the other guy's van, and then they had to rent a small car and cram into the car and one remaining van. So they were talking about on this tour when they first, and this was like the first night. So they had to ride the rest of the tour in this small car, and they were like sitting on their amps, and their heads were like crushed against the top of the van like this in the back because they were all crammed in there trying to like play music or whatever. It's just like what will you do? So
yeah.
All right, so then after that tour, they got back and they went into the studio in April of 1993 to record their second album, With Fear I Kissed the Burning Darkness. They went back to Sunlight Studios after the horrible experience from the debut. They came in much tighter. Anders Borlar, the guitarist, characterized with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness as At the Gate's darkest album. He also noted that the album's production had a heavier quality compared to the group's previous work. So just a nod to the progression, a nod to the progression, that we all go through, Also a great album. It is a very dark album. But another really sweet album. Going back to like At the Gates, they just really haven't put anything terrible out, whether the production wasn't great or not. So Thomas Lindberg, the vocalist, shared insights about the album cover, which came out of an art book, expressing the cover is probably my favorite. It's a work of art created by a Swedish author, artist, and composer, Ek Hodell. The piece is titled 220-volt Buddha.
I like that.
Act generously allowed us to use it without charge after learning about the band's music and our non-commercial approach. He was a multifaceted artist who dabbled in abstract music, wrote radio plays, and penned novels. You can liken him to our modernist in the vein of Vladimir Mayakovsky, whatever that means. If you know what that means, power to you. Collaborating with him was an honor, and I believe the cool blue tone beautifully complements the album's abstract music. Unfortunately, Ake, passed away in 2000, and his absence is deeply felt, which was a quote from Lindbergh. But another, cool album art for what it was, but, not a whole lot of creative vision there, with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness. It was cool, and I'm glad he liked it or whatever, but still not a whole lot of thought, I don't think, really put into it. I guess if, you find something, you take it out of there, or take it out of a magazine. I guess it is what it is, but...
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like they really needed help with the artwork. Somebody to step in and say, hey, you need help here.
Yeah. So the album showed the band's progression towards more melodic death metal as the songs started to be more structured and less raw. The guitars fed off each other as the musicianship seemed to evolve. Matti Karaki from Dismember appeared on guest vocals for the song Ever Opening Flower. That song is fucking sweet too, dude. I remember while I was doing this research and putting this script together, obviously going through their catalog, and I remember listening, and I was listening intently, and this song came on, and I remember the dual vocal approach, and I was like, this is kind of the first time I recognize this or whatever, and I was like, that song really stuck out.
Nice.
But yeah, the whole album rips, and this album actually, with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, was actually re-released in 2003 with 4 bonus tracks.
Oh, okay.
So there was a few times they've done that throughout their career, kind of did some re-releases. Some of these labels probably ended up putting some money into it, or I think maybe Earache put it back out or something. So
yeah, and they're a band that when they went away and they're on hiatus, the fan base still clamored for anything they can get their hands on. So it makes sense that in the meantime, while they're away, that content was kind of still making its way to the fans. So that's cool.
So after the sophomore release, the band faced a significant change as founding member and guitarist Elf Svensson departed in 1993. He ventured into various creative pursuits, including tattoo artistry, graphic novel illustration, and his solo electronic opera black metal endeavor, Oxyplegats. Tried my best, but I think it's close.
Yeah, no, I missed that album, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did too. I'm the Oxyplegats, so I got to get onto that shit. Solo electronic opera black metal. Some things just don't need to be put together. Corn and potatoes are all right, but
maybe not together.
Yeah, I don't know. So, but on a side note, Elf, his main venture was tattoo artistry, so it's opening up his own shop and everything. Yeah. So he decided to take that over playing music and probably making no money still at this point. So he was probably making money tattooing people, and he was a good Which is kind of weird to think about because we just talked about there's nobody with the artist direction in here. You got a tattoo artist in your band, and then you're picking pictures out of magazines for art. Like, what's going on here, guys?
Yeah,
Like,
maybe-
where did we miss the boat here?
Yeah, maybe they didn't want hand drawing, cover art. So who knows?
I mean, still, he's an artist, like
Yeah.
visual artist.
yeah,
So
I would probably take his artwork over a magazine clipping.
yeah, exactly. So, but to each their own. So, stepping into Svensson's shoes was Martin Lauderson, a former guitarist from House of Usher and a familiar face to the band through underground tape trading. Harken back to that once again. Martin had a few weeks to learn the At the Gate song, and they recorded a video for The Burning Darkness. They continued to tour across Europe and even making a special appearance on Headbangers Ball feature in Nottingham, England,
Hell yeah.
back in July 1993.
Hell yeah, Headbangers Ball. I need a whole Headbangers Ball volume collection from one to the end. I feel like I need that. If that exists, I need that. I'm gonna look that up soon, but I want that because there are so many gems like this, right? The interviews with Chuck or the videos with the death metal bands that were barely getting any attention. And this is probably just a little bit before Beavis and Butthead, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So, we're going to move on here to terminal spirit disease.
Now we're talking. Now this is kind of where my fanship and domain enters the picture, to be honest with you. And I had heard all of the earlier work through you because I know when we got into Slaughter of the Soul, you went back and I think got everything.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the one that really resonated was Terminal Spirit Disease. Really good work. And at the time, I remember being super into In Flames and the Jester Race. So Terminal Spirit Disease, sat really well next to that album, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So in 1994, At the Gates unleashed their third album, Terminal Spirit Disease, which would later be re-released in 2003 with bonus tracks, which marked a pivotal moment in their career. This record marked a significant milestone as it was the first to introduce rhythm guitarist Martin Larsson, who stepped in to replace Alf Svensson in 1993. Alf was still close to the band and part of the recording, contributing some lyrics and the lettering for the booklet. The album marked the first with the world-renowned producer Fredrik Nordstrom at Studio Fredman.
Nice.
Interestingly, the band had initially initiated to craft an EP of fresh material, but their label insisted on a full-length album. To strike a balance, the band decided to incorporate several live tracks to meet the album's length requirement. The live tracks sound amazing on this record and were recorded actually at a show in support of Carcass.
Oh, wow.
So just a little side note there. But the live tracks were great. They're performed awesome. I don't know if they did any doctrine in the studio or whatever. But once the album ends, I didn't want it to end there because the songs were great.
Yeah.
But they do go into the live performance.
Yes.
And man, they sound killer on the album. So
it's kind of a weird album just for that very reason that you've got 6 or 7 songs guessing, and then you have 4 more live ones at the
something
end.
like that, 3 or 4, yeah.
But it works in a way because after you hear it 1 or 2 times, you just know that there's a little concert at the end. And it's exciting because it sounds really good. You're right, however they recorded it into the board or whatever, they picked everything up and it sounds really good. For a live recording, it sounds great, and I just I love that little gem. I love that they did that for us. It was it's a really different. I mean, to me, it feels different, calling it part of your album, right? Just 4 live tracks, but that's on the album,
right?
It's. I mean, were those, now correct me if I'm wrong, were those live tracks previously recorded at all?
Yeah, because there was Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness was one. All Life Ends was that first song that they were.
All stuff from prior albums.
Stuff from prior albums.
Okay, so it did exist, but just throwing them on their live still awesome to me. I loved those songs. I love listening to that part of the album.
I thought it was cool too because that they were recording on that show that they played with Carcass. So it's obviously Carcass being a favorite of ours. So
hell yeah.
So At the Gate shot a third video for the title track Terminal Spirit Disease. The album was the second one I got from At the Gates, and although not Slaughter of the Soul, it was a great record still. We just kind of said that, but that was just my little personal note that I put in there.
Hell yeah. Fully agree.
Looking back on the recording sessions for Terminal Spirit Disease, guitarist Anders candidly confessed to not recalling much.
Can't remember
He's like, I don't know. When assessed in the context of At the Gates' earlier work, Boiler felt that the tracks on this album leaned towards simplicity and directness, Notably, the song And the World Return featured a violin and cello, illustrating the band's venture in its exploring unique ideas. I wouldn't even say that, like, you could say that that was illustrating, but it was just keeping alive because they had violin on other stuff,
Yeah.
acoustic guitars on other stuff. They've always kind of kept those elements in there to keep it different. They just
100.
they really and obviously within the flame or In Flames coming along the way and like having those really melodic tracks like that, like coming into that, having a track by itself with those unique elements really kind of set them apart and added to that melodic death metal sound, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love what it did. It gave you just a nice little breath after a slapper, and then you'd have some acoustic strumming for 90 seconds or 2 minutes, with the violin solo. It was really cool. I liked it.
So, Eduardo Rivadavia, yes, thanks. Translator here, I always got to keep him there.
I'm here.
Of AllMusic, bestowed a commendable 4 out of 5 stars on the album. He asserted that with this release, At the Gates raised their creative stakes beyond most everyone's original expectations and proved that what had once been pretty standard and uninventive death metal combo was slowly becoming a true contender in the scene. In a retrospective review, Richard Street Jammer of Invisible Oranges characterized the album as, quote, the last record before they became legends, unquote, and influencing the metalcore genre. I mean, that's fair to say. I would say that, like, now thinking about that, I know we talked about, like, Black Dahlia Murder, which was more of the death metal. A lot of the metalcore, with the beaky, 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 those kind of notes and
those
the
thrash
string
death.
skipping and with the melodic thrash, like, yeah, they did influence pretty much that whole genre, to be honest. You listen to some Killswitch, some At the Gate stuff in there. You listen to All That Remains, Unearth. There's a lot of, and like I said, even the band, Darkest Hour, like their first album, I think it's called like The Hidden Hand or something like that. Cool album, but they actually went to Nordstrom Studios to even record it. So it was like they wanted that At the Gate sound so bad.
Yeah.
But touring for the record was not without its stresses. The first night on the tour, At the Gates tour manager was, and I put quotations, robbed. And all their advance money was stolen. The next night, the door money didn't even pay for the bus they were renting.
Damn it.
They had signed an agreement with Seance's label. Remember that band, Seance?
Yeah, I do.
And they would pay for the bus, but At the Gates had to pay them back within 3 months. The tour was a wretched experience, leaving them hungry and broke the whole time.
Fuck.
And so the reason why I say quote unquote robbed, because they go back and speak about it later on the documentary, and they said that the dude said he was robbed, but they had an inclination that like he wasn't really robbed and just fucking basically ripped him off the money.
Right, yeah.
So they were just dealing with some shady characters pretty much.
God damn it.
So the whole time they talked about they were just hungry, they could barely eat, they had to like find $3 for a sandwich. Some days they didn't even eat. Like it was wretched.
I love that this is the tried and true classic, broke, starving artist story. Like they really lived it. God damn it. But that's why we love them, man. Their music, they believed in it that much. I think it's that authentic and genuine, and that's why they kind of stand above. I mean, a lot of bands do it. They do it. They do the bologna on hand sandwich, but they don't have the talent.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like they maybe have the hunger, but they don't have the talent. At the Gates definitely did.
So getting home from that tour, At the Gates, they were pretty much scared of touring after that because every one has been a disaster. Crashing vans, fucking getting ripped off, just not being hungry. They're like, like
this.
you said, starving artists, basically. They're like, what is it worth,
Bullshit.
Yeah. So when they got back, they focused on writing the most powerful songs that they could. They were focused and out for revenge. And that was a direct quote. Like they said that this was kind of like our revenge album. Like, fuck everybody, fuck the world. We are writing some shit right now.
Right.
So in the spring of 1995, they sent 2 demos to Earache Records. Earache, boasting some of the biggest bands like Carcass, Bolt Thrower, Morbid Angel, and Entomb, was very receptive to what they heard.
Oh,
so
nice.
At the Gates entered the studio with Nordstrom again and started to work on their most commercially and critically acclaimed release, Slaughter of the Soul. Anders, the drummer, had a day job and had to come and do his drum tracking at night.
Yep.
Then he remembers the song Blinded by Fear taking him 30 tries to nail it and was a major point of frustration. He said his fingers or like his hands were just callous and almost bleeding. He was almost in tears because they wanted this shit perfect.
Right.
And this was still, they didn't have computers yet.
So this is probably like play it perfect start to finish type stuff.
Yes. That's what we're doing here.
No punching in and out. No pussy ass pansy bullshit.
So when you hear the Slaughter of the Soul, and they were speaking on it too, like they wanted every hit to be like when he's like doing the grind or you know the blast, like they wanted every snare to be as powerful as when he hit it when he's just doing like a 4/4 beat.
Right.
So Nordstrom was like saying that he had to like develop this technique because he would like hit his own arm. And that's would make the hit like a little less, you know, loud or whatever.
Yeah.
He had to do like this kind of weird like octopus type thing in order for him to like hit that drum the same every time.
Oh, that's wild.
They were very critical of this. And I think a lot of that became because they just wanted to put out the most pissed off, tightest thing they could. Obviously, all the trials and tribulations from the other recordings, you know, they learned a lot from all of those and they just wanted to put out a blaster. And I think some of it, obviously, you know, when you're signed with Earache Records, like you're like they liked what they heard for the demo, so it's like now we have to put something out that's like, you know, we're playing big time here, you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure they put a lot of pressure on themselves to get it right. I mean, 30 tries on one song. It's not even a 3-minute song.
Yeah, right.
Like, but that's how difficult it was, and that's the amount of pressure that they put on themselves. But I'm glad they did because it's a great song.
Yeah, exactly. So being signed with Earache gave them double the time in the studio they had for Terminal Spirit Disease. The Anders brothers were very critical of all the takes on the records. It took Thomas almost 50 tries to get the line "go" right in the beginning.
Go.
Yeah. They said they did it over and over until they finally got the fucking right one.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just one word that fast. So some of the minuets on the records, like the Flames of the End, were performed on an old drum kit by Anders, not Adrian, the drummer. So since he had that day job, like he had to leave at night, and they had when they were talking about making the record, they had like this old shitty drum set sitting there, and so when you hear those drums with like the effects and everything on them at the end or whatever, that was actually Anders playing that on the album for that effect.
Let's just use that beat up kit and then throw some, you know, reverb delay chorus on it, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah,
there's like some flange or something on there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like if you guys, there's also another cool just specifically making the record, not the whole In Flames of the Flames of the End documentary that I'm talking about. There's another cool thing where it's just like Thomas and I think it might be Martin and Frederick Nordstrom, just talking about making just that record. That's also on YouTube. You can check out too. I think one of like the re-releases of the At the Gates record comes with a DVD too, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably.
So
gotta have that bonus content if you're gonna resell it to me.
Yeah, exactly. So after the record, At the Gates embarked on many interviews and press write-ups for the album. And having an actual budget, they flew to the UK to shoot their 4th video, Blinded by Fear. The album art was done by Christian Wallen, whom Thomas had played with in his first band, Grotesque. So that's kind of a cool, like, his old bandmate came back and made the art for the Slaughter of the Soul.
Yeah, probably their best artwork, I would say.
Oh, yeah. So the album...
up to this point.
Yeah.
Up to this point. Because I think the artwork on the covers to come are actually pretty cool, too.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I just like the whole... and they actually speak about, like, the whole art process in this making of and how they really liked it with the guns and the Jesus and all that. Like, it just kind of fit the whole, you know, the whole aesthetic of what they were going for.
Especially as you're listening to the album and you can hear the guns kind of going off here and there a little bit, like loading or what have you, cartridges, you know, ejecting. So, yeah, I love it.
So this album, widely regarded as their magnum opus in the death metal genre, showcased a remarkable evolution from their earlier works. You know, we spoke on this album as one of our top 5 greatest albums.
Absolutely.
You know,
of all time death metal.
In our episode. So like that just goes to show of what kind of record this came out. And then this is where I put in the correction. We already spoke of that, so we don't have to talk about that. So actually, Andy LaRocque, from, well, he's on One Death record, but from Merciful Fate, actually has a guitar solo on the record.
Yep, I recall.
Yeah. So they had Frederick went to this music shop and he was working in there, and he was like talking to him or whatever, and then they had him come and do the guest solo.
Nice.
And in that little making of it, it was a cool little thing that they talked about. I kind of forgot that he did that solo, but like it's very Andy LaRocque with they're like the pitched guitar tones and everything. Like they're very specific to him. So very cool little tidbit about Andy LaRocque being on the album as well. So Slaughter of the Soul not only solidified their position as frontrunners in the Swedish death metal scene, but also defined the essence of the Gothenburg sound in melodic death metal. The international music scene took notice, propelling them into the limelight. The album's success earned At the Gate several U.S. tours and extensive airplay of their music video for Blinded by Fear on the MTV in the United States. However, despite their newfound global recognition, the departure of the Boiler Brothers in 1996 dealt a severe blow. Anders was just tired of touring, and there was still not much money to be had in the touring musician's life. Recognizing that it would be impossible to continue without them, the band made a painful decision to call it quits.
Yeah, it's like we found out about At the Gates and then they broke up. God damn it.
Pretty much.
Fucking hell. Like, yeah, in our lives, so up to this point, they're maybe 5-6 years into their career, but we're maybe 5 or 6 months into listening to this band.
Yeah, exactly.
We're just picking up Slaughter of the Soul and working our way backwards, just going through everything. And then they pretty much break up, and, we continue to listen to them for years.
Yep.
But I think another band came out of this, right? I have a feeling you're going to tell me about that, or maybe not.
Well, I'll tell you kind of what they did. So post breakup,
okay,
1996. When At the Gates disbanded in 1996, its members scattered into various musical pursuits. Drummer Adrian Erlandson, bassist Jonas Broiler.
Broiler?
Broiler. I don't know.
Broiler?
I am saying Broiler. So
you're doing fine. I love it.
The guitarist Anders Broiler came together to form The Haunted.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Thomas Lindberg ventured in collaborations with different bands, such as Schitism, a side project he's actually was in that side project for a long time. I think that band together was actually together for like 13 years. He was kind of messing with that band. So he was doing that like in the meantime, like probably off tours and stuff with At the Gates, because they said that band was together for a long time. They say he was in the Crown. He was on the one record, and I think he toured with them once. Lockup, which is like a grindcore band, and Night Rage, which was all shit that I was consuming because I needed whatever I could after At the Gate. Oh, they're The Haunted now? Oh, Thomas is in Lockup? Oh, I had to consume all of that.
Nice.
None of it was At the Gates, unfortunately, though. And then in 1999, Erlandson took his drumming skills to Cradle of Filth. As a nod to their past, Peaceful Records released a retrospective music collection titled Suicidal Final Art in 2001. So still trying to put out that stuff when they're not around, right?
Yeah. I appreciate that they kept the legacy alive. It's frustrating as a fan when you see, At the Gates is doing what? Oh, it's just a best of,
right.
If it's got new content on it, it's cool, but it's still not. It hurts to see that something new is coming out, but the band's not coming back.
So, in 2007, the band started talks of the reunion. And through lots of email correspondence, they came up with a plan. More mature and more relaxed, in mid-2008, At the Gates made a resounding comeback with a series of reunion shows. They had a total of 3 practices and embarked on a Japanese tour with notable acts like the Dillinger Escape Plan, Into Eternity, which I'm just going to side note that band right now, Into Eternity. God, I love Into Eternity. That's so one good band that I should have even mentioned in my honorable mentions of great albums. Oh, yeah. Man, they're so badass. Pig Destroyer and Mayhem in May of 2008.
Let me jump in real
quick.
Just the fact that so much to unpack from that one sentence. 3 practices, playing for a Japanese audience, and on the bill, Dillinger Escape Plan, Into Eternity, Pig Destroyer Mayhem. I'm fucking mind blown. 3 practices, bullshit. Like you've been practicing for 11 years on your own in your bedroom leading up to this show. Don't lie.
Well, I mean, when they were talking about the reunion, they just said there were a lot of emails back and forth, just so many every day, like just so many things they wanted to talk about and just be like, yeah. And I think they knew, and I may get into this, but I'll just say it now. It's like they started to realize the impact that this record made when they were done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of this shit came into fruition when they were not at the gates anymore.
Right, yeah. Doing other things. Yeah. Living their best lives.
Right. So then all of a sudden this album just starts growing into the monster that it is, just getting watered by all of this metal that's being influenced by it.
Yeah.
And all of these bands that are making progress and success saying, oh, yeah, my band is because of Slaughter of the Soul. And they're like, oh, what the fuck about us? We made that shit. Like,
yeah. So 10 years on, I think that it really started to not only withstand the test of time, but it had spawned a whole genre in its likeness.
Okay, I'm going to try my best here because there's some weird festival names, but other appearances included appearances at festivals like Gitaf Electric Festival, Roskilde Festival, Ruis Rock, Wacken Open Air, Grasspop Metal Meeting, Sweden Rock Festival, Gods of Metal, Hellfest Summer Open Air, and Bloodstock Open Air.
Nailed every one of those.
Okay,
dude. Thank you.
Throughout July 2008, they crisscrossed the U.S. and Canada, and it was humorously dubbed the Suicidal Final Tour.
Great.
Culminating in a memorable UK show at Bloodstock Open Air on August 17th, 2008.
Yeah, I recall them coming back around that time. I was living in Kalamazoo, maybe moving back to Muskegon, and I thought it was, pretty cool that At the Gates was coming back. And they've been back for this long, and I still haven't made my way to see them. I'm so ashamed of myself.
We'll get there, man. We'll get there.
They're still together. There's still a chance.
Yep. As soon as we see those tickets. We just have to be more familiar with more music because they're not just going to play Slaughter of the Soul. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, we're going to have to know the other stuff, too, because now they have more music, and obviously we'll get into that in a second. So a lot of the U.S. Souls were already pre-sold, like when they went. They were already 50% sold out.
Right.
So something that they've never seen before.
Right.
Because they could barely get by doing tours before.
Right.
And now all of a sudden there's mention of them playing and half of their shit sold out before they even start.
Right.
And the reception was overwhelming.
Naturally.
And then, as we already spoke on, it was like after they broke up, the Slaughter of the Soul album propelled the band's popularity to heights never imagined by them.
Yeah.
Great art speaks for itself.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of my note in there. Like, I mean, it's just art, man.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it just takes a while for that great art to be discovered and appreciated. Yep. It is what it is. Circumstances being always different for every artist. Van Gogh, I don't think he ever saw any appreciation in his lifetime.
Oh, right.
But everybody loves Van Gogh.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep. Or the Sistine Chapel. Like they probably, here's some dickhead painting the ceiling. Who cares?
Who's that guy?
Yeah, well, he's got a lot of paint in his eye. What is he doing? Better him than me. I don't know. So the grand finale unfolded in Athens, Greece, featuring a special guest appearance by The Ocean on September 21st, 2008. The band's electric performance at Wacken Open Air in 2008 can be relished in the Flames of the End DVD box set, complete with snippets from other venues and a comprehensive documentary chronicling their history. Okay, so I did mention on that. So the Flames of the End, they have that documentary piece on YouTube, and that's where I got a lot of this from.
Sure.
I own this box set, but finding a DVD player to put it into was probably the other issue. So I have that actual DVD somewhere.
Yeah.
Where all the CDs are buried somewhere. I don't know where, but
I still keep the old tech on hand, but it's getting to the point where you can't even have a physical copy. What good is it, right?
Yeah, I think the Metal Maniacs Pod Studio is going to have soon displayed all of my media over here just so we can reference it. Like I just need to get a shelf or something to put here so we can.
I love it.
I can have some visual aids of myself, not just you always bringing your visual aids all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. It's fun for me, though. It gives me my visual aids purpose.
So we're going to move into now At War with Reality. So we're talking 2014 through 2016.
Okay.
So on January 21st, 2014, At the Gates tantalized fans with a cryptic YouTube video hinting at the possibility of lyrics for an upcoming album. Just 6 days later, on January 27th, via a revamped Facebook cover photo and profile picture, the band officially announced their 5th record, At War with Reality, scheduled to drop in the fall of 2014 via Century Media.
That may be why I kind of they again fell off the radar for me, because they just came back to do some work in 2008, and then you didn't hear anything for 6 more years. And it's easy enough to overlook anything at all
by that time,
day to day, and you're not looking for an At the Gates album 6 years after they got back together. I definitely blinked and missed it.
And I think during that time they still were playing a lot of shows. That was kind of when they came back, but I think they were just riding on that Slaughter of the Soul, cashing them checks, and then they were like, oh, now we got some money, maybe we'll write some new shit since we've been hanging out.
Yeah.
And I know I prefaced before, but that was one thing I want to kind of like go back to that I missed. Like, one of the big things is what they were talking about is they were all more mature when they did the reunion.
Yeah.
They, they had other life experiences. They understood how the business worked, or even the new music business, because things are always changing and evolving, right?
Right.
And they were all a lot more relaxed. Before, they're uptight kids getting crammed into buses. They didn't know what the hell's going on. They're just trying to figure things out. But, when they approached it from a more relaxed state of mind, I think things started to come a little better, because obviously they were way more outcome driven in the past.
Yeah.
But then once their work started to show some fruits of, they started to see some fruits of their labor.
Right.
I think that also probably led to some of the relaxation, because they're like, okay, we're welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think they maybe were a little bit more validated in their own work and relaxed, that they knew that whatever they were doing would be pretty good with the fans, as long as they were still coming from that place of genuine creativity, but maybe not stressing on it like they were throughout the Slaughter of the Soul process.
Right. Yeah. So when questioned about whether At War with Reality would mark At the Gates' swan song, or if the band had further recording plans, Thomas Lindberg cryptically replied, "We can't say. We have no plans of stopping, but we've broken promises before, so it's best not to say anything." In interviews, various band members have expressed their interest in crafting a follow-up album. And older, more mature At the Gates were inspired after the success of The Return. Seeing that they were bigger than ever, and I put a note, and I'm sure money to be made, and capitalizing on actually seeing some dollars in the wallet always helps.
Well, that, and you kind of look at all your life's work, and you never really made a dime off of it, and now you're finally starting to go. It's kind of like you left money on the table.
Right.
Go back and get it.
Yeah.
Now people are pining for you. They'll throw money at you,
Right.
like, shut up and take my money.
Right, yeah.
Go out and get it. You've earned it. You've worked so hard for it at this point.
You and I we still want to give them money. We just said we need to go see them live, and I'm sure we're both going to buy a fucking shirt or a hoodie or whatever. You know what I mean? So
You've arrived.
Yeah. Hopefully you listen to this. We want to see you play. Thanks.
Yeah.
And buy a shirt.
Yeah, come to Detroit or Chicago area. God, I'll
We'll
be
be
there.
there.
I'll be there.
As long as it's not fucking December 21st, because that helps when it's not a winter show either.
I hate driving in the Midwest in the winter, dude.
Know. But so although okay, so here's another note that I have in here. So although we missed this particular album and mentioning of the top 5 albums, because we had talked, what I noted on before.
Yeah.
I wrote this album basically picks up where Slaughter of the Soul left off.
Okay.
Although hard to follow that iconic album, this album is a beast. Great riffs, melodic, and just as heavy as Slaughter of the Soul. I mean, there's some different kind of groove on there. Do not overlook this album.
God damn it, I overlooked this album.
Yeah, do not. So that's why I stressed that. I didn't even put Nick right there. No, I'm just kidding. No, because I actually did too. Because
it happens.
I had to give it an intentional listen. And when I did, because as we stated, and we'll state a lot of things get swept under the rug. At the Gates comes out with a new album. Well, there's 50 more bands that I like. I've started liking this other kind of band. All of a sudden during this time too, so they have inspired a whole genre themselves, but now we got tech slam, death metal. We got all this other crazy stuff coming out, other bands that I'm listening to now. It didn't have an impact. I wanted this album, but I bought it listened to it, and I just kind of was like, okay, it's cool, but it's not that. Coming back around and listening to it, I was like, why did I do that with this album? Because I
Right.
was not listening close enough, because
Yeah.
there are riffs on this
Yeah.
album. It's melodic. Like I said, like it does pick off where Slaughter of the Soul left off.
Right.
It's almost a Slaughter of the Soul part 2 because
Sure.
it is that good.
Yeah, so it's they're consistent. They stayed good over time. I mean, I'm gonna go back and listen to it and be excited about it. And I know that life happens, jobs, kids, different styles of music, your own band. It's easy to be like, holy shit, I missed that album.
Mhm.
I mean, we could sit here and talk about bands like Hypocrisy, who's got a huge catalog, and I'm sure we haven't listened to all of it.
no.
You know what I mean?
Not
So
even close.
there's and we love that band,
Right.
right? So yeah, it happens. I'm looking forward to going back and listening to it myself now.
Yeah, it's definitely a recommended one. So, At the Gates ultimately wrapped up the touring cycle for At War with Reality in August 2016 with a festival performance at Elbe Riot in Hamburg, Germany.
Nice.
So on March 8th, 2017, in an official band statement, At the Gates revealed the departure of Anders again. However, undeterred by this change, they confirmed their commitment to crafting a follow-up to 2014's At War with Reality, with their sights set on a 2018 recording and release date. In September 2017, the band introduced Jonas Stahlhammer as their new permanent guitarist to fill Boiler's role. I think I said his last name 42 different times in this, so I'm sorry. Like that J and the O thing, I don't know, man. I should have Googled it beforehand, but
I think it's like
Bjoiler.
a Bjoiler. It's
Yeah,
just
Bjoiler.
it doesn't matter. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can fuck up my last name too. You can say it, whatever. I don't care.
Ingersoll.
Yeah. Say it how you want. I don't care.
Can't
I
hurt
just call
me.
them boilers, so
Can't hurt my feelings.
yeah.
Dude, how many
Whatever.
Dude, don't even start with me on the last name shit. Mine's so easy, yet everybody fucks it up.
Oh, I
So
bet. Yeah, it can be pronounced multiple ways.
I cry and die every time.
Yeah.
It seems so fucking easy.
Yeah, it does.
Why did you invent my name over again? It's
Yeah.
so there.
Yeah,
and
yeah, it's
easy.
right there. You're overthinking it. You're thinking too hard about this one. But let's just try it again.
Every time though, every time somebody says it to me wrong, I die.
That's
God damn it.
amazing. All right, so Jonas, replaced Anders,
Uh-huh.
but he joined too late to contribute to the new album's writing process.
Hmm.
They kicked off studio sessions in November 2017, leading to the birth of To Drink from the Night itself,
Ripping good album. Fucking love it.
released through Central Media Records on May 18th, 2018.
Would have been a nice little late birthday present to you, correct?
Yeah, right. This album has the At the Gates feel, but with a little more progression to it.
Yep.
Some great songwriting and memorable riffs. This album furthers the catalog in its own unique way. So we got Slaughter of the Soul, epic masterpiece. Then we got At War with Reality. We're just coming tail end. We're keeping that At the Gate sound alive. We're riffing like that. We start getting into this To Drink from the Night itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're still infused with this At the Gates, and you listen to it, and if you've gone through their discography like I did from front to back, we're pulling elements from all these other albums as well. We're not just doing the At War with Reality and just going with what we know. Okay, now we're going back to some of these other elements that we've had before.
Yes.
Some of the weird Discordy stuff, some of the extra, like, not just, although it is still very melodic, there is some progression to it. There are some different elements, some different vocal elements. They're really starting to be like, okay, we're back in the band. We're progressing. We're going to just start being experimental again, you know?
Yeah, a couple of things for me too. For one, just on a personal anecdote, the direction of their music at this point, it really moves into my wheelhouse. This is where I want them to stay, and they keep going in this direction in the next album too, and I love it. And thank you for that, At the Gates. But I feel like, with all of the hype, the Slaughter of the Soul, 10 years on more, you get Slaughter of the Soul 2.0 with the previous album, right? At War with Reality. And then, so they probably just made a conscious decision to not sound like that further. Like, let's not continue to sound like only Slaughter of the Soul,
Right.
which is a great album on its
Mhm.
own. Obviously, it's huge. It's a landmark album. But they probably said, let's go back to even before that when we had more instrumentation, more elements. So I think they made that decision consciously, and it worked out for them, in my opinion. I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Stay with it.
So,
July 2021.
yep, we're moving into July 2021. I know during that album, when they released it, they were still touring. You know,
Mhm.
they were still doing their thing. They were still selling T-shirts. So there isn't a lot to be said. News in there, no member changes or anything like that. They literally
Other than
was
the
just-
one.
Yeah, other than the one to add, and you know, they did the typical tour cycle. They
Yep.
did the typical, you know, thing. I will say this, I believe at the end, but I just will mention something about it right now. These guys have a shit ton of videos. So I talked about the first, you know, they had like one video per album
Mhm.
up through Slaughter of the Soul.
Right.
They have 13 music videos. So
Oh, no.
with these other albums,
Right. There's a bunch
they
of
put
them.
out like 9 music videos.
Yeah.
So like each one of these album has like 2 to 3 music videos
Okay.
for them. All
Okay.
videos I didn't see, I didn't actually watch because I
Right.
listened to the albums.
Right.
But they have a shit ton of videos. So I'm assuming they're making videos, they're putting them out on YouTube, they're, you know, they're still touring, they're still playing the festivals. So like they're still in it, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? They're writing music now, but they're still touring. So now we're fast forwarding to July 2nd, 2021. At the Gates unveiled their 7th studio album, The Nightmare of Being. While firmly rooted in the Gothenburg metal tradition, this release ventured into a broader musical spectrum. Once again, even further from To Drink from the Night itself.
Yeah.
This release, it embraced a lot of diverse ranges of styles, influences, and instrumentation.
Fully agree.
The album's concepts drew inspiration from the writings of horror philosophers such as Thomas Ligotti and Eugene Thacker. So, I finally getting ready for this album because I wrote this script a while ago.
Mhm.
I didn't get a chance to tighten it up before we went into it, but I had enough notes here to make it work.
Plenty of notes.
But with that being said, I went through the whole discography, but I didn't get a chance, and I never took the time to listen to this album until this Friday.
Okay.
So 2 days ago. So that
Okay.
was fresh on my mind.
Great.
This album is fucking badass, too.
It's so good.
Dude,
It's so good.
It
Now,
is sweet.
But it's not Slaughter of the Soul, right?
No, not even close.
Not even close.
Not
but
even
it's-
close.
And I listened to it, and I had that same feeling. I was like, man, it's almost hard to call it At the Gates, but it's At the Gates.
Yeah, it's at the Gates.
And I wouldn't even say they softened their sound, but it's just not as angry maybe as like say Slaughter of the Soul
Yeah.
or even some of the older work. But musically, man, I loved it so much and I enjoyed it. And every time I do listen to it, every now and again, probably not as much as I should, as much as I do love it. Really great album and definitely in my wheelhouse,
Yeah.
where I like to sit and listen to like. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's got groove, and then they go into their spaces with their melody, and then they bring it back to the heavy, and I really appreciate it. It's a really great album for them.
Yeah, it is. And like the biggest thing with all music is just that intentional listening. Like I know everybody doesn't have time for that, but if
Right.
you really want to get into something, you can't just throw it on in the background and
Yeah.
be like, because I've done it. I've done it to all these albums, or
Sure.
at least the last 3. But until I intentionally listened to them with a specific goal in mind to get what I could out of them and
Yeah.
just and appreciate for what it was,
Right.
it didn't hit me like it did.
Right.
Because I've spun this album before and it was just
Sure.
like, okay, it was just on. But when I intentionally listened to it, I'm like, oh, saxophone? What the hell?
Yeah.
Like, but it fits.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
It calls, and they still keep like the folk sound.
Mm-hmm.
Their Swedish Gothenburg sound.
Right.
There's heavy shit on there. It gets heavy. It
Yeah.
gets real heavy
Yes.
at points.
Yeah. It's a
But they
great
do
album.
break it down with like some spoken word, almost poetry type stuff.
Yep.
Because Thomas is never going to sing clean. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
Because he's
sure.
always got that specific, very unique voice that
Yeah.
no one sounds like him. He doesn't sound like anybody else. If
Right.
there is, I'm sure there's somebody out there. But like he's got a very specific style and voice.
Yeah.
But he does some different vocal things on here that we've never heard him
Yep.
do before. And he
Correct.
fills out some of the slower space with vocals, which is totally cool.
Yep.
You know. So yeah, great album, man.
It's
It's
more
just
of
a
a-
great album.
More of an atmosphere album and a mood album. I think you'd have to find an appreciation for it. You'd have to find a place for it where it makes sense for you to listen to it because you're not going to get the same exact feeling out of it as some of their older work. But I definitely would. I would say to any At the Gates fan, if you haven't listened to this one yet, it's worthy of your time. It's still At the Gates. It's a little bit different, but I'd say the newest work, definitely get into it. I loved it. Can't speak highly enough on it. The Nightmare of Being, great album. Great
Awesome album.
Very instrumental.
And that just came out in 2021. So, I mean,
yeah, we had a whole pandemic to forget about everything in life. So if you overlooked it, nobody's blaming you.
Get back on it if you're an At the Gates fan, and hopefully you are if you're listening to this.
I know I've got some homework to do.
Right.
I'll be listening to some At the Gates coming up this weekend or this week.
So after the album, the band faced another twist in their lineup. In July 23, 2022, so just over a year ago, they announced that Jonas Stahlhammer's departure. However, a few months later, on October 5th, they delivered a surprise announcement. Original guitarist Anders Broiler had returned to the fold. With Broiler back on board, they've set their sights on crafting their 8th studio album. And that's it.
Yeah.
There you have it. They set their sights on it. I haven't heard any word on it. But
I don't know if I've seen any recent social media posts from them, but I trust they're gonna drop one on us soon, and I'm about to love it. I like how these guys have stayed such close friends in and out of the band over the years. It sounds like it's never a matter of like bad blood. It just sounds like opportunity and availability, really. With other things in life, whatever.
Just the grind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Family and things I think come into the picture. Needing time off, I think we can't say enough about getting, personal time, rest, valuable rest in our lives. So, yeah, these things happen, but I love that these guys keep coming back to it and dropping new nuggets on us all the time. Their music has been some of my favorite in the metal genre over the years. I am sad that I've overlooked some of it. I'm not going to beat myself up too bad throughout the whole podcast over it, but I'm a huge fan. But I was surprised that they had that 2016 release that I missed. But But that's
14,
cool.
I think.
Yeah, that's cool. I got something to go back and listen to. But I love the last 2 albums specifically, after Slaughter of the Soul, To Drink from the Night Itself, was it? And
The Nightmare of Being.
Yes, The Nightmare of Being. I don't remember titles of things as well as I used to. I used to catalog everything, band members, track lengths, lyrics, all of it. But now I can't.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do.
I'd be lying. Some of it's in there tattooed on the brain. I'm never going to forget some things, but nowadays I'm lucky to remember the band name itself.
Yep. Well, with that being said, I mean, there you have it. That's pretty much where we're at with At the Gates. I looked up like their social media, and I looked up on their website. They have a few shows that they've announced this year, but they're European shows. They're not on tour or anything.
Right.
So they are still out there. They're still playing. And I wrote this note here, so maybe I was even wrong about the video thing. It says since 2014, they have recorded 13 videos. So maybe they have 17 videos total. Ooh. So they have more videos than even what I said earlier. So they have a boatload of videos. But they have 8 studio albums, and they have like 5 EPs. Okay. So like the EPs were like splits with other bands. Right. Obviously, the first one, Gardens of Grief, was an EP. They had an EP they put out in 2019. Now, I didn't listen to that, so I'm not familiar with that one either. So they did put out an EP, like a short EP, but I felt like that might have been like some leftover tracks from either To Drink from the Night Itself or The Nightmare, not The Nightmare of Being. It was before that because it was 2019, but I think it might have been some leftover stuff from To Drink from the Night Itself. But they do have an EP out there too, but I didn't get into that. But yeah, so they started their career, disbanded after the 4 albums and the 1 EP, a couple splits here or there. Had nothing going for them, just was burnt out on the whole thing. Right. They come back after that album grew to be the monster that it did. And then since then, they've put out work, and now they're just back being a full-time band, basically, making their living off their art. So,
yeah, they almost
hell of a story.
Yeah, almost disappeared into obscurity, like on a high note. Right, like a landmark album, Slaughter of the Soul, but then almost into oblivion, right? Yep. Like, kind of would have been like, oh, whatever happened to them? Well, they put out that album and they disappeared. Thankfully, they came back and they put out some real home runs, in my opinion. I think if you're not a fan or not familiar enough with At the Gates and you're like, well, where do I start? I think it's Slaughter of the Soul, right? I mean, would you tell somebody to listen to Slaughter of the Soul if you want to get to know At the Gates, or would you direct them otherwise?
I'd agree with Slaughter of the Soul. I mean, just because it's such a quintessential album in metal, the metal pantheon as it is. Yeah, like the ethos of metal, that one spawned genres itself and multiple bands by itself. So start there. if you're a big fan, you can go back.
Yeah.
I mean, Terminal Spirit's great.
Yes.
But you also have to, like, I could see if you only like metalcore, you would like Slaughter of the Soul. You may not like Gardens of Grief because there's some Blackened death metal weird shit going on there.
Right.
So that might not be for you.
Right.
If you're an extreme metalhead, you would love it.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you
don't get
But
into
yeah,
that,
you could start there because I think every album after that fits perfectly
Yeah.
into what they've done.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you could go back to Terminal Spirit Disease if you really like Slaughter of the Soul and enjoy that as well. But I think for newer fans discovering this band, start with Slaughter of the Soul and just work your way forward. Maybe even go to the Nightmare of Being and see that there is some diversity, and then go backwards again, because you could do Slaughter of the Soul just because it's their most core work, and then you could go to the newest one and see where they're at now, and then where did they get all that instrumentation from? And then you could work your way back to Terminal and before, and you could see it's always been there. It's honestly not as prevalent on Slaughter of the Soul. It feels like it's there, but it also feels like more of a thrash death melodic album than some of their other work, where it really leaned into the heritage and the culture. I think it's there in those instrumentals a little bit.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem as prominent as some of the older work.
Right.
And I wouldn't say they abandoned it for that album, but like, you know, as you stated when we were talking about it, they were really focused in on that music being perfect. So I think they were really dialed in on their instruments, on their parts, and not leaning on the cello or the violin or any other outside orchestration. So
with that record just being so pissed.
Yeah, like there isn't a lot of room for that same melody that you get out of their other albums.
Right.
That album is extremely angry.
Yeah.
And that's why I almost hesitate to recommend it, because it's like their angriest work. It is so vicious, Slaughter of the Soul. The title of the album really, that's what you get.
Right.
You know, like that's what you feel like when you listen to it. Versus some of the other stuff, it's a little bit more relaxed, and there is a little bit more melody and instrumentation in there to space it out.
But I will say with Slaughter, those elements, there is like enough there to break it up. Like I like the little minuets and the cool little, and then like, you know, they have like the
outros and
they have like some of the little cleans on a couple of the parts, like distorted cleans, but enough to like break it up so it's not just batu for 35 minutes. You know?
No, they definitely do enough, even on that album, as pissed as it is, to like give you just a little bit of breathing space, you know, so that it's not nonstop 1-2 grind beats or thrash, you know, beats in your face. So any one of those from 96 forward, I think is money well spent. And I know that we're going to be watching them a little bit more closely this year to see either a new album news or any tour news our way.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what we'll be watching for sure. So, well, with that being said, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Metal Maniacs Podcast. If you guys like that, we really appreciate it. And much love to you guys, man. Keep it metal.